Good evening and welcome from Westwood. My name is Julie Sina, and I have the privilege of serving you in our UCLA community as our Associate Vice Chancellor for Alumni Affairs and work directly with our parent and family programs. I want to begin by first acknowledging our community who have been impacted and continue to be impacted by the fires of this past week. And to our parents, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Also want to acknowledge that this has been a time of uncertainty for you and the challenge of really wanting to be communicated and have those updates from campus. And that's what we're here to do tonight. We have a panel of university leaders that are here to assure you that UCLA is keeping the safety and well-being of your students, our students, as our top priority. We want tonight, our goal is to provide very clear and transparent updates on our campus operations, our processes, and to give time for your questions. Just so you know, we received over 600 questions from you for today's event. And so what we've tried to do is to take the themes of the questions that you've provided to make sure we address those, but you'll also have a chance to provide some questions to us directly tonight that we also hope to get to. And want to acknowledge on the front end that in this hour, we probably won't be able to get to all 600, but we assure you what we don't get to tonight, we will follow up with you. And also want to share with you that our Parent and Family Association staff will be on the chat, providing you with updates and providing you with links to information as we go throughout this webinar. So what we're going to be doing tonight is we have three of our campus leaders. So they're going to provide a brief update from their areas, and they're going to get right into the questions that you submitted to us, as well as to the questions that you provided online. So we're going to jump in and get started. I'd like to first call upon our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Monroe Gordon.
Good evening, Bruin families. Thank you, AVC Sina, for moderating. And I also want to thank everyone for joining us today for this very important town hall. As stated, my name is Monroe Gordon, and I have the honor of working as the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at UCLA. As a parent of a Bruin student, I understand how difficult it can be to see your student navigate challenging situations such as this, especially for those parents who are not nearby. I want to start by acknowledging the immense resilience of our Bruin community and the important role that you, as parents and family members and loved ones, play in supporting our students. I also want to express my condolences to everyone who has suffered loss from the devastation caused by the multiple fires in Southern California. The suffering and devastation we're witnessing is highly personal. Our paramount goal is protection of our students, faculty, and staff, and availing our resources to assist the broader Los Angeles community and the surrounding communities. I want to address the current situation regarding the fires and their impact on UCLA. While the fires remain off campus, we have been working closely with local authorities and environmental experts to monitor the situation for the safety of every member of our community. My colleague, Administrative Vice Chancellor Michael Beck, will provide more details shortly about our current conditions and what UCLA is doing to stay prepared. I want to assure you, as loved ones and parents, that the safety and well-being of our students and our faculty and our staff is our highest priority here at UCLA. Over the past several days, we've taken significant actions to protect our campus community. Coming into this week, as a safety measure, remote instruction for all undergraduate and graduate courses was extended through Friday, January 17th, as approved by the Academic Senate. Also, remote operations for most campus functions were put in place as directed by Chancellor Frank. These decisions prioritize health and safety while ensuring continuity of education and services. Most students have already left campus and the surrounding areas by UCLA. For those who remain, we estimate approximately 1,000 to 2,000 students are still living on the Hill here at UCLA and in university housing, with an additional student count residing in the UCLA community. We've communicated with students to understand their specific needs, and we're fully prepared to support them should the situation escalate. While we do not have an order of evacuation, if an evacuation order were to happen or become necessary, we have comprehensive plans in place. Our housing and hospitality services, as well as our residential life staff, are fully trained to guide students through the evacuation process. We have identified off-campus locations, including nearby universities outside of the wildfire path, where students can be safely accommodated. For the estimated 500 students who have indicated that they will need a place to stay, we have secured more than enough beds at off-site locations. Additionally, if necessary because of an evacuation, a UCLA wildlife evacuation hotline will be established and communicated. We understand that this is an incredibly stressful time, and our mental and physical health resources remain available to support students. The Ash Student Health and Wellness Center is operational, and our Counseling and Psychological Services, better known as CAPS, is offering 24/7 crisis counseling. This counseling can be accessed through the number of 310-825-0768 or through the CAPS website. Please encourage your student to reach out for help if they're experiencing distress. I also want to mention that all in-person student organization meetings and activities on campus have been rescheduled or canceled through January 17th. Despite these changes, we are encouraging students to remain connected virtually through study groups, online events, and even by checking in with a friend. As Chancellor Frank has reminded us, UCLA connects. In times like these, connection is key. We connect with one another and we connect with the broader community. This mutual support helps us all thrive even in challenging times. To stay informed, please monitor our newsroom website where all campus updates are shared. You can reach that by going to newsroom.ucla.edu. Thank you for your trust and partnership in ensuring the safety and well-being of our students. And please know that we are here for you and your student, and together, we intend to get through this. Now I'd like to pass it over to Administrative Vice Chancellor Michael Beck, who will provide more detailed updates on the fires in our campus operation.
Monroe, if I could just jump in with one quick question before we go to Michael Beck, because it just came in from a parent. You mentioned specifically the evacuation plans. Could you just share how those plans are communicated to students should that happen?
Yeah, so we have spent a good amount of time making sure that not only through email, but also very directly, we've been communicating with our students on the Hill. What we've seen over the last week is that more and more we're seeing fewer and fewer students on campus. What that's done is it's given us a chance to be that much more directive with individual students and making sure they understand where they would go to the extent there is an evacuation.
Thank you, VC Gordon. So on to you, VC Beck.
Great. Thank you, Julie, for hosting this evening, and welcome to all the parents. We know this is a very challenging time, and so I'm hoping we'll be able to provide some information that'll be helpful to everybody. And I do want to thank Vice Chancellor Gordon and his entire team, who did just an exceptional job of caring for our students. Quick update on the situational status of the fire incident. As of January 14th, the Palisades fire is 23,000 acres that have burned, about 17% contained, which is an increase of about 3%. The good news is they were able to get a line around the entire fire last night, so this is helpful in being able to put out hot spots that may occur. The Eaton fire, which also impacts many of our employees and some of our students, that's at 14,000 acres and about 35% contained, and that's an improvement of about 2%. The red flag warning will be in effect through a widespread area. It's really to the north of UCLA, and the winds actually did not end up being as strong as they predicted today. So they've actually lifted the red flag warning, but it'll actually be reinstated in the morning. And then the expectation is that it'll be withdrawn again at 6 p.m. tomorrow night. But as we look very specifically at UCLA, it's been actually quite calm here last night and today because the winds are really staying up in the valley area. The current AQI at UCLA, air quality at UCLA continues to be good. That, of course, may change as the winds continue to change. For most of the fire event, the winds have been from the northeast or from the east, and so it's been blowing the smoke away from the campus. I do want, UCLA is adjacent to an evacuation warning zone. It's right across the street from the northwest portion of the campus. But I do want to say very clearly that no evacuation warning or mandatory order for UCLA property has been issued at this time. This gives you an idea of the fire. I wanted to give sort of two different perspectives, one on January 10th and then one today. These are infrared images of the fire zone for the Palisades fire. You can see January 10th, the hot spots indicated in red and the darker yellow dots to the north and to the east, where the predominant portion of the fire was focused. As of last night, when they took the last infrared image, you can see that there's actually no hot spot. There were no hot spots within the fire perimeter, and they've been working to make sure that any hot spots that come up are able to quickly be put down. And so we're very pleased with the amazing work of the firefighters over the last period of time for the fire. They've done a tremendous job, even under very trying circumstances with the severe winds that we saw. We also want to share that we ended up developing a dashboard that enables us to track, identify specific students and our employees that are living within each of the different evacuation zones in the warning area or in the mandatory evacuation. So as of earlier today, we had 607 students that were impacted by evacuations, with 344 in an evacuation warning area and 272 in a mandatory evacuation area. This ebbs and flows. It's actually a dynamic model that actually takes the data directly from Cal OES and Cal Fire as they establish the zone. So it enables us to monitor that. The cumulative impact over the entire fire is about almost 1,150 students were in one of the zones over the period of the fire. And for employees, we have about 2,100 currently in an evacuation zone, one of the two evacuation zones, with almost 3,350 that have been in an evacuation zone sometime during the period.
So VC Beck, if I could just jump in real quick, because
Of course.
questions come through. I know that VC Gordon spoke to our on-campus students. Given what you're chatting about in terms of these zones, could you speak a little bit about support we're providing for our off-campus students?
So when we look at the off-campus students, anybody who was in the zone, VC Gordon's team in residential life and the Dean of Students actually been reaching out to the students that existed in the zone with a phone call to connect with them personally, to see, check in on them, and then for those that are closer to the campus, identifying whether or not they needed transportation should they be moved into a mandatory evacuation zone. Well, excuse me, I'm talking about two different things. That is for folks around the campus that are not in a zone. I defer to VC Gordon to answer the question with regard to how we're reaching out to students specifically in the zones. I apologize for the confusion.
And maybe I'll just take 2 seconds to sort of respond to that. I would say, similar to what Vice Chancellor Beck was saying, for students living in these evacuation zones, we've actually been calling. And so we did two things. One, we tried to reach out both with a survey, both for those students who were on campus, as well as those who were just off campus. We've also had the Dean of Students reach out specifically with an email of support. But then in the last 2 days, we've also been calling these students directly, really to ask, is there any additional support that students need from UCLA so that we can be prepared to assist if necessary.
And do you feel like there's been a good success rate in being able to reach the students?
I think there's been a great success rate. In addition to that, we heard from students is that they've been overwhelmingly grateful to hear from the campus and to know that there are individuals who are on the campus that are interested in their well-being.
Thank you so much, VC Gordon. Back to you, VC Beck.
And so going back to where I was heading, is that Student Affairs actually did also reach out to students that were living within what we call the North Village, whether they were on campus or off campus, connecting with each of those individual students to determine whether or not they needed transportation in the case of an evacuation order, and whether they needed housing if they didn't live in our property. So on January 11th, the Emergency Operations Center for the university was activated, and a proclamation of emergency was declared. The Academic Senate, as a result of that, made a decision to authorize remote instruction through January 17th. We also had a corresponding decision for employees that could work remotely, that they were recommended to do so with supervisor permission. Functions that are still open, UCLA hospital and clinics, all of them remain open with the exception of one clinic that actually burned down in Pacific Palisades, and then a few clinics that actually have been without power. And so all of those operations have been moved to some of our other clinics in the region. The Student Health Center continues to be open. Our general operations for the university continue to be open. Residence halls, the dining halls we've reduced because of the limited number of students that remain, are able to get their meals from Brew and Plate, but the other dining halls were actually closed. ASUCLA continues to be open. The Wooden Center is closed for general use, and the libraries were closed. There's a lot of questions associated with what our evacuation planning is, and I do want to mention that I know there's some frustration that we don't articulate where the individuals will be evacuated to, and we do that for a number of reasons. One is we don't want to create a security risk for the individuals at that location, and is also dependent upon the number of students that we have to evacuate. So at one point in time, when we had a larger number of students on campus, we had identified an area where we would create staging, where we could move thousands and thousands of students very quickly off of the campus, put them into a staging area where family and friends could either pick them up, or we would then move them from that staging area to other facilities, housing facilities, both owned by the university as well as those that are available from other universities in the region. And that it does flex based on what those institutions have available. But here we identified, for this incident, we identified two what we call rally points, depending on where the students lived. And then they would be, if they needed transportation, they would go to those rally points, get picked up by buses for UCLA and delivered to a staging area if necessary, and those that could transport themselves would do so. And then after the end of the event, the university would return the students back to the campus that we had transported to the remote housing facilities. At the remote housing facilities, plans are made to make sure that they can be fed during that time, as well as provided other residential life programming through student affairs. Evacuation planning for employees is actually handled through direct contact with supervisors, and then researchers and laboratories. Once we had an evacuation area that was adjacent to the campus, then we communicated with the researchers that they needed to begin their planning and preparation for ramping down laboratory research in case we would go into a warning zone or ultimately into an mandatory evacuation zone. There's a number of student resources that are available. I would say these resources are also available to parents, but probably the most comprehensive one is to go to the UCLA newsroom, and there's a special microsite under for the Los Angeles County Fires with just immense amount of information for students, employees, parents, really good data. So I encourage you to go there. There's also Bruin Safe Online, which provides access to emergency conditions and emergency information, as well as a very clear link to the UCLA's air quality dashboard. And there was also information that Vice Chancellor Gordon and myself sent out to students on January 9th, which had additional links to other information, including access to counseling and psychological services, mask availability, air quality, and then basic needs. We also have there's also an opportunity to donate, help, or get assistance from the same website. There's also a number of federal, state, and local resources that are available for people who have been directly impacted by the fires. And so there's a number of sites either that at each of those levels that we recommend people to refer to. I would also note that there's a FEMA Disaster Recovery Center that actually opened today. That's at the UCLA Research Park at the corner of Pico and Westwood Boulevard. And we're very pleased that that's going to be able to serve all of the West LA communities. We encourage parents and all of the Bruin community to stay connected and get information from the university by going to Bruin Safe Online, as well as registering for Bruin Alerts, which students are automatically registered through their registration process, and then utilizing the LA Fires microsite that I mentioned earlier. And then if there are any questions that you're not finding on the microsite, where we also have a Q&A, we also invite you to email the university at wildfirerelief@ucla.edu, and we'll do our best to route your questions to the appropriate individuals for them to be able to respond to you. So for that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to turn it back, Julie, to you as we move the.
Thank you so much, VC Beck. And just a reminder to our audiences, we are recording this, and it will be made available on our websites as well as our YouTube channel. And our team is putting all these links in the chat as well, so that information will be available to you as a follow-up. So now I'd like to introduce you to Dean Adriana Galvan, who will speak to us from an academic perspective in terms of the classes. So Dean Galvan.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you for being here today. We've been so impressed with the remarkable resilience and flexibility of our Bruins and the outreach to help each other and to help our fellow Angelinos. And I thank all of the parents for being here tonight. We know that this is a stressful time for you, and we're doing our best to maintain academic continuity with compassion for our students. I'm the Dean and Vice Provost of Undergraduate Education, and so I think deeply about how the academic continuity can happen despite the crises that we are facing. As you all know, remote instruction has been mandated by the Academic Senate, which is a governing body on campus comprised of faculty, through Friday, and we don't yet know when that will resume, when that will be lifted so that we resume in-person instruction. I know there are a lot of questions in the chat about that, and I absolutely hear you. We recognize the need to provide you with updated information about remote versus in-person instruction as quickly as possible. And we are doing that based on the safety and when it is safe to bring Bruins back to campus. As soon as we know that information, we will provide it to you. We know that some of you need to book flights and that you are thinking about how your students will fare when they come back to campus. And that will happen when it is safe to do so. We encourage our students to be in conversation with their faculty. Our faculty are also individuals who have been impacted by the fires and the crisis, and so they are doing their best to be responsive to students. If your student needs additional support in working with their faculty, please reach out to my office or in the Division of Undergraduate Education or the Dean of Students office, and we will be happy to work with them individually. Just so you know that there is no campus-wide mandate to mandate the way students are interacting with their faculty about exams or midterms, and that happens on an individual basis. But again, we will provide you the information about remote versus in-person as soon as we are able to do so.
Thank you so much. So now we'll go into the questions that both we received, the over 600 questions we received, as well as the questions coming in online. And panel, I'd like to start with the commitment that we made at the start of this webinar, which was to have a conversation around transparency and information to our parent and family audience. So the first question for you is, if you could talk a little bit about how decisions are made what does a decision-making tree look like? And in particular, to the point that Dean Galvan just raised, how are we going about making the decision about opening campus back up and students returning? So talk to us about the decision-making process at UCLA. What's that tree look like? And how are those decisions being made this week? So I don't know if someone would like to jump in. I could maybe ask you, VC Gordon, to start, and others could weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. And actually, I think having Vice Chancellor Beck speak to this as well is going to be important. I think what's important to understand from a university perspective is that we have shared governance, and that shared governance allows for understanding and decision-making both from our administration as well as from our faculty. And the faculty shared governance comes under the academic senate. So the decisions on instructional modality are decisions that actually are made through the academic senate, whereas decisions on operations for the campus are made through the administration and starting with the chancellor. So from a transparency perspective, there are opportunities for all of the leadership to get together and discuss the conditions, and then for recommendations to be made from one to the other about the types of operations as well as the instructional modality that would be most appropriate given our situation. I will invite Vice Chancellor Beck to also weigh in on this.
Great, thank you. So there's a two-step process. One is from an operational perspective. We look at what the operational status of the campus is, and we have three current criteria or status, which is normal, modified, and emergency. We're currently in emergency, and under emergency.
And just to clarify, who determines that, VC Beck?
Yeah, so that would be the incident commander, and so the chancellor. And that's based on the information in this incident. It's based on information about wind conditions, fire conditions, and AQI, as well as the impacts associated to the community. So as I said earlier, the campus itself has not been under direct threat of the fire, but clearly as the fire has raged out of control in relative proximity to the campus a few miles away, it creates a risk, and the university campus is a rather large population. And so as a way to prepare and be able to manage that population, we always want to try to get it in front of that as much as we can. So as it relates to specific timing, we're already making an assessment. We're using the data that we have. We actually also use our faculty. We have faculty experts on weather and air quality and other areas that we use during emergency situations, as well as our own technical experts on our staff. We're making those assessments. We'll make a decision in, I would say, in the next day or so as to the operating condition for the campus. And then it'll move to the academic senate if that is necessary to have them consider a separate modality. If we move to moderate, which is where I would expect us to move later this week, if conditions continue to improve, which they certainly look like they're going to, then that would trigger that classes would return to in-person modality, unless the academic senate wanted to make a decision about some alternative modality. So
two quick follow-ups, if I could, real. One parent is asking is there a level of containment required in terms of the fires for the campus to reopen?
So there's not a particular trigger associated with containment or a specific area, such as the issue associated with a evacuation warning area being adjacent to the campus. But we do look at all of those elements as we look at and assess what the risk to the institution is.
Thank you. And the second question that's come in quite a bit is you've brought up air quality a couple of times. Could you speak to what measures the campus takes to ensure safe indoor air quality, particularly in residence halls for our students?
Certainly. So twofold. One, we do measure both outdoor air quality at 5 different locations on campus and indoor air quality at 3 different locations. we have on the dorm in the housing and specifically almost all of the facilities have what's called MERV 13 rating filtration for when they are bringing in outdoor air. A number of the buildings and newer buildings actually have just recirculated interior air, so it's more like a hospital environment. And then there are 3 of the older buildings that do have some exterior passageways, and so so that has more of an opening, but each of those are looked at from a filtration. So we close down the dampers on the outside, those buildings that have the ability. So we stop importing in outdoor air when the air quality gets to a level that would be inappropriate to be bringing that air into the building.
Thank you so much. And a follow-up to that question or that point for you, VC Gordon, is parents are sharing that they've heard that the smell of smoke is present inside the residence halls. So just wondering if that is, if you could clarify fact or fiction on that one in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, I think, to say. We're here in West Los Angeles, where we have in fairly close proximity the Palisades fires, and so I'm sure that there is a greater smell of smoke in the area. I would rely on what Vice Chancellor Beck said, though, in terms of how we're measuring the quality of air indoors, and so we don't currently have a concern that the quality of air is one that's unhealthy or that students shouldn't be breathing in. I would also say, though, beyond that, that we have staff who are there and prepared to assist students, and so if a student is saying that they are being sort of laboring with breathing because of the quality of the air, we want to make sure that we take immediate steps to both assess and assist, and we would do just that. Last thing I would say is, I think for parents who I've seen in the chat, in terms of coming back, if I have a student that either has a disability or has other kinds of breathing challenges, we have a Center for Accessible Education, which provides levels of accommodation, disability accommodation for our students. And we have a number of staff who are prepared to work with students really immediately to be able to put those accommodations in place for their faculty.
Thank you so much.
I would also add that masks are available for any student who feels that would be appropriate for them. And that's certainly something that they should avail themselves of if they felt that was important. And they can get those at the front desk of any of the residence halls, or they could get that from the ASH Student Health and Wellness Center.
I know we make them available also at the front desk of the Alumni Center. They're frequent places on campus. I see that the masks are accessible. So Dean Galvan, I've got a follow-up question for you. We've heard a lot tonight about the decision-making of the Academic Senate. So could you talk a little bit about, or give us some insight into how decisions are made by the faculty around remote versus in-person classes?
Thank you, Julie. The most important thing to keep in mind is that we strive for academic continuity and recognize that it can be disruptive to oscillate between remote and in-person instruction, while being mindful of the safety concerns that we've mentioned before and that we're talking about and that students are concerned about in the chat. So decisions are made to minimize that disruption, and that is unfortunately very challenging to predict given the current circumstance. But the governing body of the Academic Senate meets and discusses all of the ramifications and the ramifications for midterms and final exams that may result if we are to remain in remote status.
And just a follow-up question to that is, parents are asking also around how do we handle, or how do faculty handle lab-based and practical courses during remote learning?
Yeah. So when it is just a few class meetings that happen, they can typically work around it. They have alternative ways to provide student instruction. We certainly have learned during the pandemic that there are different ways to assess student learning. So hopefully we won't have too much time where there are disruptions to lab classes, but faculty are aware of that. There's a lot of instruction and guidance from the Center for Teaching and Learning at UCLA that provides alternatives and potential alternatives for all types of courses, whether they're lab-based or performance-based, and et cetera.
Thank you so much. So VC Gordon, a follow-up question for you, and I'm sure other panelists will want to weigh in as also is, our students, we can acknowledge that our students have been at UCLA during some very disruptive times. If we go back to, the spring to this situation, what are your thoughts on how we can restore the fabric of our Bruin community, and sort of that narrative and magic that is a UCLA student experience?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and something that we've given a lot of thought to. And as you know, we've been in partnership in terms of our various divisions and thinking about this for some of the other crises that we have seen in the last few years on campus. Additionally, we are often talking about from an undergraduate student perspective, students who came from high school or maybe out of community colleges during the pandemic. And so they were already coming in, I think, with a bit of a fractured student experience prior to coming to the campus and having to also deal with that as they've come to UCLA. The one thing I would say is that in student affairs, we've got 27 departments, all dedicated to trying to create a better student experience for UCLA students. To the question that was asked earlier about how we sort of are tracking students, particularly those off campus, the one thing I neglected to say is that each of the offices have sent out information, an email to students through their listserv, just to ensure that students recognize that there are individuals on campus who actually care about them and want to know what's going on with them. We have specific surveys that also went out from various departments that, again, ask for any needs of those students. And we have programs, even through this very challenging time. Colleagues up in residential life and housing have actually provided programs that allow for students in and around the area to come together in a sense of community.
So during this past week, Monroe?
During this past week, exactly. And we'll continue to do that as long as it's feasible to do so. So I think to your question, Julie, we are working on programs and services that hopefully allow for better senses of community and being able to bring students together. And also, we're working very closely with our academic colleagues because the overall student experience is not one that is compartmentalized between the experiential learning aspect and the academic aspect. So I think it's really important that we're thinking through the entire developmental process for our students, and that's what we're attempting to do.
Thank you so much, VC Gordon. And I see that we're also someone who's not on our panel but available as a resource tonight is our academic Vice Chancellor, Mike Levine. And I see you have raised your hand, sir, so I want to call on you to give your response as well. So welcome.
Thank you. I can't seem to get my video started. So one of the things that we have—
We can hear you, so.
Okay, we have a number of programs going campus-wide. One is called Dialogue Across Differences, and it's a program that includes faculty, staff, and students in different ways of learning how to listen to each other and to listen to different opinions. And this is one of the major things that we're doing to try to heal what occurred last spring across campus.
Well, thank you so much for reminding us of that. And I think our team just put a reference to that in the chat as well. So Dean Galvin, I'm going to pass this one to you. It's sort of on a continued theme. What kind of advice would you provide for students that, given the increased stress of what's going on right now and the impact on friends and family, and just being rattled in general, as we come into a time that impacts, getting back into class and grading and assignments, what kind of guidance might you provide?
For them to find the support, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or to reach out for that support, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. We know that a lot of our Bruins are, even if not directly impacted from the fires, or at least indirectly impacted by mere fact that they evacuated and left the campus. As VC Gordon has mentioned, there are a lot of resources for students to reach out remotely, in person. There are a lot of student services still available to students. Academically, all of our academic advisors are still working the same number of typical hours as before the crisis occurred. So if students are feeling distressed because of academic reasons, they are encouraged to reach out that way. For other emotional, psychological reasons, they're encouraged to visit CAPS. If they are in crisis related to financial burdens, they are encouraged to reach out to financial aid, or the emergency crisis response team is also ready to assist. So hopefully we have a holistic approach to support students. We know that even not in times of crisis, we need to provide these additional supports for our students, and we hope that they take advantage of that.
As a follow-up to that, maybe both for you and for VC Levine, who's on the phone, on the Zoom, who we can see you now, sir, is we've also heard from students who are concerned about their faculty who have been impacted. And we've had a number of faculty who have lost their homes.
Yeah.
What kind of guidance might you give to students to support their faculty as well?
I think we are trying to find various methods to support faculty, or not only just faculty, but faculty, staff, and students who have been affected by the fires in different ways, especially having their homes affected. And I think the best thing to say is for everybody to try to be nice to each other and to be very, very patient and realize that things are not occurring as they want to occur now, but they will change as we move forward. And that would be the best advice that I could give.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. So VC Beck, I'm coming back to you. Question has been raised about what we're doing around water quality on campus, and are we monitoring water quality in Westwood and for off-campus apartment students?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We continue to work with LADWP and environmental health and safety to make sure that our water is meeting the standards. I would say none of our facilities are within the area north of Santa Monica, where there's instructions not to drink the water. That's specifically related to water quality issues associated with a fire that do not extend to the main campus or any of the facilities owned by UCLA for campus housing.
Thank you. Excuse me. One question that's come up a couple times is for either you or for possibly VC Gordon. For our students who are on campus, or even our students living off campus right now, is there a curfew?
There's not currently a curfew for the campus or Westwood Village. The curfew is specific for areas in Santa Monica and within the fire zone.
I'm going to try to get as many of these in the time that we have. So I apologize in advance for a little rapid fire here. Fire is probably not that good comparison there. I apologize. If an evacuation does occur, is there a mechanism to ensure that every student is accounted for? VC Gordon, or sorry, VC Beck, jump in.
Happy to have VC Gordon answer that if you prefer. We did develop a system which allowed students to check in when they got to the rally point, and then they would be identified whether or not where they're going. They would be then verified when they're on the vehicles, and then once they get to the buses to the staging area, then they would again be identified and then clarified which group they are going to be in, whether they're going to be in a group that's going to be picked up and continue to monitor it. We were actually had been developing a system, an app to be able to do that. The numbers were low enough that I think it would probably have been simpler to do it with a simple Excel spreadsheet. So we had both of those mechanisms readily available to us, and the intent was to track them from the pickup point through the entire process. And I would actually add also through student affairs, they were actually reaching out ahead of this time with each of the students that are living on campus or within the North Village, and identifying each student and what their particular needs are, whether they needed transportation and whether they needed actual housing if they had to evacuate. So we had a list of all those students as well.
Thank you so much. So again, clarification question around evacuation. Would evacuation begin in the case of a warning or only in mandatory evacuation?
So normally it would only occur in a mandatory evacuation period, but I want to say that these are fluid and we make decisions based on the best interest of the students. So if we were full, if we had 15,000 students in our campus housing we had a fast moving fire and we were put into a warning zone, it is possible we would start our system associated with voluntary evacuations. It's all dependent upon other factors as to what we do. We certainly don't want to move students off campus and have to put them back. That's very disruptive. But we also want to recognize the volume of students that we have and how best to manage that situation. So that part of the plan is actually flexible based on the situation.
So follow-up question for you, Dean Galvan. A parent is asking if a faculty member is impacted and has to transition to remote work, will and how would the students be informed?
Thank you for the question. They will be informed by their faculty, and or if that faculty person is unable to communicate that information by the department. I know anecdotally that in different departments, faculty are really supporting each other. And if someone is unable to provide the instruction, they are offering their other faculty are providing their services to step in. So we are doing our best to accommodate those gaps in instruction based on crisis.
Thank you so much. VC Beck, I think this one goes to you. Could you speak to what's the level and process of coordination between UCLA and our local emergency services?
So our EOC is in contact.
And EOC is?
I'm sorry, Emergency Operations Center, thank you.
Thank you.
Is actually in regular contact with the city EOC as well as the county EOC. And we actually sent our fire chief or the fire chief from UC Davis who came down to support us.
So UCLA has its own fire chief as well, is what you're saying.
That's correct. We have a very small fire department, but we do have a fire department.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not usually on 24 hours a day, but we actually put them on 24 hours a day. So they were on watch during this entire period. And the fire chief or somebody from UCLA Fire would go to the Cal Fire briefings that were at Zuma Beach. And we also had the fire chief from UC Davis. They have a much larger fire department there. And they came down. They actually have a fire company that's actually assisting through mutual aid on the fire lines. And either he or somebody from our fire were going to the Zuma Beach briefings. And then in the EOC, we were actually watching the briefings from Cal Fire as well, because they're broadcast to those centers. So we have very close coordination, and then also with LAPD regular communication. So in our EOC is UCPD as well as UC Fire and other important units of the campus. I'll just take a moment because this did come up about campus security. When the fires started and we were looking at potential evacuations, we also called mutual aid for UCPD. So we actually have a number of police officers here from other campuses in anticipation that the campus would need additional security if the campus population declined to a level that it's now, or that it evacuated, so that we could make sure we provided security on the campus.
Thank you so much. Dean Galvan, a parent is saying that a student had a faculty member email that classes were canceled for the week. The question is, are faculty free to make those decisions about classes being canceled?
Thank you. The Academic Senate has given, actually this happened during the pandemic, to give instructors the discretion to cancel classes for one or two class meetings, but beyond that, they would need approval from their department and from their dean. So for this week, that may have been permitted, but moving forward, faculty do not have the ability to cancel classes just writ large.
So where would this parent encourage their student to get in touch with somebody to talk about this kind of concern?
To talk to the chair of the department or the dean of that division.
Well, thank you so much. So another question came in. Any chance the library can be reopened while classes are remote? Not sure who that one would go to. BC Gordon, I see you.
Okay, yeah, I'll come off of have my video off. I think that as we think about modified operations, I know that our campus librarian is also very mindful of that and has curtailed certain operating hours. She's also working very closely with our leadership, and so the campus librarian being a part of UCLA leadership and determining what is most feasible. We do have, I mean, if the question is about spaces for students, the one thing I will say is that in modified operation, we actually do have a number of student service spaces that remain open for students. And on the Student Affairs website, the UCLA Student Affairs website, as well as our individual departmental websites, we have information about the operating hours of those areas. So, what I would say is I don't want to speak for our librarian, but I know that our librarian is taking very seriously the feasibility of having different libraries open at different times, working with campus leadership. And in addition to that, we have other spaces open and available for students during modified operating.
And students would find that information on the Student Affairs website?
UCLA Student Affairs website. And if you were to look at there's a tab there for departments, and that is the best way to understand the operating hours for each one of our departments.
Thank you so much. So VC Beck, back to you. Can you speak on UCLA's monitoring of toxins in the air, which might not be measured in air quality indexes, generally are based in regional measures?
We do have the ability to do those measurements. What we use now is the same sort of standards and methodology that the EPA uses for the air quality monitors, but I do acknowledge that those monitors are designed particularly to look at PM 2.5, and although we've tried to tune them to be more sensitive to fire-related issues, smoke-related issues.
So, and you may have said this before, so I apologize for going back, but given the number of questions about the air quality index and how we measure that, is there any place that someone can get that information on our websites or through our information in terms of what the current air quality might be?
Thank you for asking. Yes, the UCLA does have an air quality dashboard. So if you just go to your search engine and search for UCLA air quality dashboard, it'll pop right up. What's also nice about that site is if you scroll down from the dashboard is actually the University of California decision matrix associated with different levels of air quality for different groups of people on campus. So for instance, we look at pull it up. We look at it for outdoor workers, we look at it for indoor classes, we look at it for campus operations, health system operations, athletics and outdoor recreation, outdoor camps and events, and pre-K through 12 programs that are on the campus. And for each of those, for each of the different EPA criteria levels, we have different actions that the university would take, either from a recommended action or a required action. That was actually something that UCLA was actively involved with. I actually chaired the committee that actually put these standards in place for the entire University of California. The committee actually involved experts from UC as well as from the national lab. So I do encourage people to go to look at what the decision matrix is.
Thank you. And we'll make sure we put the link to that in the chat as well. So back to you, VC Gordon. If a student has been impacted, by this current situation and just feels like they can't get through the rest of this quarter, and are also concerned about safety on all levels, and decides that they're going to drop out this quarter, could you speak to that and whether or not a student would be refunded at this point in time?
Yeah, certainly. And maybe more broadly, as I would say, I think in many ways, so many of our students have been affected by what has transpired. And there are different ways and different sort of modalities to assist them, right? And I first and foremost would say that if a student has been affected sort of directly with loss of property or loss of life within their family, we certainly want to ensure that we know about that and then reach out to further support that student through our CAPS area or through our case management services. And what case management services does is it literally tracks the student And we would assist the student in every aspect of their experience here at UCLA, from the academic aspect through their basic needs and through any other experiential learning aspect for them. As you mentioned earlier, another way to be affected is through their engagement with faculty. And so through the Dean of Students Office, as Dean Galvan said, we would be able to provide levels of support to students who may need assistance and engagement with their faculty. And so ultimately the decisions around the academic enterprise fall to the faculty and fall to the academic senate, as we have said, but we're here to work in partnership, both with our academic colleagues as well as with our students, and both partnership and support. And so they could go to the Dean of Students Office. Specifically to your question about reimbursement, that is not a decision that yet has been made. As VC Beck has said, I think we're monitoring things quite closely at this time to determine ideally when we can return back to normal operation. Additionally, many of the departments, as I said earlier, in student affairs remain open and available. In some instances, those services have moved to online status, but those departments and those services remain available. So there is not yet a decision, though, Julie.
To jump in on that one real quick, given we're down to about 3 minutes left here, is, again, back to that transparency around communication. What guidance would you give parents in terms of where to look around that, and when to expect, if at all, that decision to be made on return?
Yeah, the guidance I would give, I always say, please contact me. There is a Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, both email address, and many people find my email address quite easily, so I'm out there. And we generally will take the questions and other concerns from parents and then be able to provide them to colleagues on campus.
We also, I think, have put the parent and family office contact information in the link multiple times, and we partner very closely together in making sure we get your questions answered. So again, I think has been noted, just to check out those websites that we update pretty quickly in terms of when those decisions are being made. So I want to thank all of our panelists tonight, and also Mike, you for being here as well, and acknowledge again that we certainly have not had time in this very quick moving hour to get to the over 600 questions that have been raised. But I assure you that our parent and family team, who's been filling up our chat with all of that hopefully helpful information for you, will get back to you and respond to the questions that you've raised that we may not have time to get to tonight. And, again, I want to go back to ending with where VC Gordon, you started. And that's just speaking to what our priority is around connection. In times like this, connection is so key. UCLA connects. We connect with one another, with our Bruin community, with our broader community. And at this time, more than ever, it's that mutual support of connecting with one another that will help us all thrive. So again, thank you so much. We did record this. It will be available on our websites and our YouTube channel. And again, hopefully all are safe. Go Bruins. And this will hopefully be the first of many conversations and updates for you. Thank you so much.